I don't ask much of the world anymore. Just give me my land, my tools, my peace, and keep the damn nonsense on the other side of the fence. That was the deal I made with myself when I left the Army and bought this patch of Louisiana soil 15 years ago. 30 acres of stubborn ground, a handful of greenhouses, and a private gravel road that wound through the pines like a lazy copperhead. It was mine, registered, surveyed, and defended, first by paperwork, then by principle. I turned that patch into a business that paid its own way. Rare medicinal herbs, niche spices, clean and legal. No meth labs, no weed fields, no BS. Just 8 hard-working folks, contracts with hospitals and pharma startups, and more damn bureaucracy than I ever saw in Baghdad. And then came the letter. It showed up in a pale blue envelope, the kind HOA types think looks official. The return address was from Willow Dunes Homeowners Association, a development about a mile down the road. They had their manicured lawns, little white fences, HOA newsletters with clip art, and about as much grit as a rice cake. I wasn't part of it. Never had been. The letter, however, didn't seem to care about that detail. Dear property owner, due to recent safety concerns regarding traffic, heavy equipment, and potential hazards to community residents, we formally request that you cease the commercial use of the gravel road that intersects Willow Dunes territory. This is for the good of the neighborhood. Sincerely, Karen Wendler, President. The road they were talking about was mine, fully registered, cut through my land, and only intersected their development visually, maybe from a drone. It never crossed into HOA jurisdiction. Their houses couldn't even see it unless they climbed up on their attics and squinted through a telescope while leaning out the window like a lunatic. I tossed the letter into the burn barrel without ceremony and went back to reviewing the new crop test results. 2 days later, one of my drivers, Luis, called me from the loading gate. He said there was a patrol car parked near the east entrance, where the delivery trucks usually turned in. 2 officers were standing there, not blocking the road, but eyeballing every vehicle that passed like buzzards, waiting for a tire to blow. I went out there, leaned on the gate post, and asked them if they needed something. The older one said there had been some anonymous reports of suspicious activity at this address, but they were just observing for now. I told them to get a warrant or get gone. They left after 10 minutes, but not before one of them started jotting down plate numbers. That week, we had 3 late shipments due to drivers taking the long way around to avoid the attention. One client canceled a repeat order worth over $20,000. Another flagged us for logistical inconsistencies. I installed new cameras, put up more signage, sent a courtesy notice to local law enforcement that this was private property and commercial activity was fully legal and licensed. No response. Then the complaints started. First, it was chemical smells. Then it was loud machinery at night, which was laughable considering we wrapped up production by 6:30 every evening. One of the reports claimed they saw unidentified personnel in hazmat suits walking near my greenhouse. Those were my guys in Tyvek suits handling pollination for a rare Thai ginger that reacts poorly to pollen drift. Not exactly Breaking Bad. 2 deputies showed up again 3 days later. No warrant, same story. I met them at the gate, turned on my body cam, and asked for documentation. They said they didn't have any, but they had the right to investigate a citizen complaint. I told them they had the right to leave unless they wanted to answer to the sheriff and my attorney. They left. That night, I found a video on a local HOA Facebook group, grainy footage of one of our trucks loading at dusk with a caption that read, "Is this legal? Do you feel safe?" The tipping point came when a major hospital partner pulled their contract. They cited community pressure and local instability and said they'd found another vendor. That was a $60,000 annual deal. Gone. Just like that. No calls, no questions, just a polite email and a voided agreement. I sat alone in my office that night, reviewing footage, staring at a list of deliveries that weren't going to happen. My boots were muddy from a busted irrigation line, and my coffee was cold. But I felt heat rising anyway, not from the radiator, but from something older. The kind of pressure that builds in your ribs and starts whispering in your ear. You've been patient. You've played by the rules. And they're still coming. So I made 2 calls. One to my lawyer, and one to a friend I knew from the Army who now worked in logistics intel. They wanted a fight? I'd give them a war they wouldn't see coming. The second police visit came before dawn on a Tuesday. I was packing crates inside the greenhouse when the motion alert pinged my phone. 2 cruisers rolled down my private road like they owned the place, headlights off, engines low. For a moment, just the hum of insects and the soft pulse of the irrigation pumps filled the night air. Then the officers stepped out, hands already resting near their holsters. No knock. No greeting. Just movement toward my gate, as if they expected the lock to bow to their badges. I walked out, wiped my hands on my shirt, and met them halfway. "Unless you've got a warrant," I said, "you're trespassing." One of them, a younger guy with a jaw like a clenched fist, held up a clipboard. Anonymous complaint, suspicion of illegal cultivation of controlled substances. I almost laughed. "Medicinal ginger," I said. "The only thing I'm cultivating is patience." He didn't find it funny. The older deputy squinted past me toward the greenhouses. "We need access to verify the tip." "You need a warrant to access anything on this land. The gate stays closed." The younger deputy stepped closer, crowding my space. "Sir, lower your voice." "My voice isn't the issue. The law is." That's when I saw the unmarked Jeep parked way back near the tree line. Headlights off, but I could make out the silhouette of someone filming with a phone. HOA currency wasn't money. It was gossip. They weren't here for safety. They were here for content. I took a slow breath and kept my tone even. "I'm asking you to leave." "You're obstructing an investigation," the younger one snapped. "I'm exercising my property rights." He didn't like that answer. He grabbed my arm. Instinct took over. Army reflex, muscle memory older than reason. I pulled back, not aggressively, just freeing myself. In half a second, he twisted it into something else. "Stop resisting!" "I'm not resisting." I kept my hands visible, palms up. "Don't escalate this." He escalated it anyway. Handcuffs went on. My cheek hit the hood of my own truck. Cold metal. Cold night. Hot fury. The older officer read the charge. Disorderly conduct and noncompliance. Noncompliance. That was the word they used when they didn't actually have a crime. They shoved me into the back seat while a camera flash went off near the Jeep. Of course, Karen's personal paparazzi, HOA snipers with iPhones. In the holding cell, they didn't let me call anyone for hours. The concrete bench felt like it had been poured from spite. I stared at the ceiling tiles and counted the slow seconds. By the time they finally released me, after I signed a written statement that said absolutely nothing, they handed back my phone and my belt like they were doing me a favor. 8 missed calls. 5 texts from my operations manager. 1 message that froze my blood. Client withdrew. Shipment canceled. Contract void. Another $60,000 evaporated because of HOA paranoia and police theater. When I drove back to the property, the sun was rising. The road felt longer somehow, like every yard of gravel weighed more now. My crew was already working. They acted normal, but I could feel the tension. They were scared. Not of the crops failing. Not of losing hours. They were scared of the police. I gathered everyone inside the main shed. The room smelled like basil and soil and frustration. I told them the truth. What happened, what would happen next, that we weren't rolling over. They nodded, even if some of them didn't fully believe it. When they left, I stood alone at my desk and opened my laptop. My cursor hovered over the police department's online complaint portal. I uploaded the body cam footage, timestamps, badge numbers, and a detailed statement. Then I sent it to Internal Affairs and the Sheriff's Office. No response. I repeated the process for the State Agricultural Authority, documented the disruption of commerce, listed contract losses, attached footage of the officers blocking access. That one got an automated reply. Nothing else. That night I sat on my porch with a mug of coffee that tasted like burnt resentment. Coyotes howled somewhere beyond the fields. The air buzzed with humidity and cicadas. They wanted me rattled. All they did was remind me that I don't back down. If the HOA was planning a war of attrition, they'd just made their first real mistake. They taught me who the enemy was. 2 weeks passed like a slow bleed. Every morning, I woke up expecting it to be over. That maybe the circus would pack up and leave. That Karen would move on to some new target. Maybe a fence built 2 inches too high, or a mailbox painted the wrong shade of beige. But she wasn't done. Hell, she was just getting started. It was a Thursday when the third act began. I was in the workshop fixing a busted irrigation sensor when Mateo radioed in from the front gate, said there were officers again, this time with official paperwork. My stomach didn't drop. It clenched, coiled up like a rattler ready to strike. I told him not to open the gate. I met them outside 10 minutes later, after I'd reviewed the security feeds and slipped on a clean shirt. 3 officers this time, 2 from the sheriff's department, 1 in plain clothes who looked like someone's uncle pretending to be FBI for Halloween. One of them held up a folder. "We're here to execute a search warrant," he said. I took the folder, flipped it open. Looked like the real deal at first glance. Case number, date, judge's signature, the usual. But the paper was thin. The stamp was wrong. The judge's name didn't match any of the local benches I knew. The signature looked more like a doodle than a signature. "Give me a second," I said, stepping back. I snapped a photo and sent it straight to Sarah Kaplan, my attorney. She was fast. Within 5 minutes, she texted back, "That's a forged signature. That judge retired 4 years ago." "Sit tight. I'm filing an emergency injunction." I turned back to the officers and handed the folder back. "This is invalid. You've got a forged signature on a defunct template. If you step onto this property, I'll treat it as trespassing and obstruction." The plainclothes one stepped forward, all puffed up confidence. "You want to risk escalating this?" "No, I want you to leave while you still have badges." He didn't like that. But before he could reply, 2 unmarked black SUVs pulled onto the road. Federal plates. That was Sarah. The emergency injunction had gone through faster than expected. She'd leveraged a contact at the district court. The men in suits stepped out, introduced themselves as part of the Internal Oversight Division. One of them took the fake warrant, scanned it, and raised his eyebrows so high I thought it might crawl off his face. The next 20 minutes were a blur. Voices raised. Questions asked. Phones dialed. The plainclothes guy tried to walk away. He didn't get far. They put him in cuffs right there on the gravel. The 2 deputies didn't resist. One looked ashamed. The other just looked tired. When they opened the plainclothes guy's wallet, it all came together. Michael Wendler, Karen's husband. He wasn't law enforcement. He used to be a county clerk. Hadn't held office in years, but he still had access to some old documents and digital stamps. Apparently, just enough to cobble together a warrant that looked real to anyone not paying close attention. But I'd been paying attention since this started. The investigators searched his vehicle and found a laptop, a portable printer, and a folder labeled Citations to File. Inside were forms pre-filled with my name, my address, and a checklist of supposed violations. Half of them were absurd. Unregulated biohazards, inadequate containment, suspicious import codes. It was a damn fantasy novel written in legalese. The investigators told me off the record that this wasn't the first time Wendler had improvised, and now they had enough to open a full criminal inquiry. I watched them drive off with him in the back seat, cuffed, silent, small. It should have felt like a win. It didn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't just Karen playing dirty. It was an operation. Coordinated, premeditated, and deeper than I'd realized. She hadn't just sicked her husband on me. She had officers on her leash. She had access to tools she shouldn't have. The next morning, Sarah called, said they'd traced Wendler's forged documents to the HOA office printer. Apparently, he'd logged in under the shared admin account and left a digital trail that looked like a drunk raccoon had used a keyboard. Amateur hour. But it was enough. A formal investigation into Willow Dunes HOA had begun. Search warrants, real ones this time, were being issued. Phones were seized, computers collected. One of the junior board members cracked under questioning and gave a statement. Karen had told them, quote, "We'll make his life so miserable he'll have no choice but to sell." They underestimated me. I'm not a man who runs. They'd kicked the hornet's nest, and now they were going to learn what happens when the wrong man remembers how to fight. Sarah didn't waste time. The same morning they hauled off Wendler. She had me in her office with 2 cups of black coffee, a whiteboard full of arrows and timestamps, and a file folder thicker than a phone book. She'd turned the case into a campaign, one I didn't even have to command. She was the general now, and damn if I wasn't glad she was on my side. "We're not just going after Wendler," she said, drawing a red circle around the words Willow Dunes HOA. "We're going after the structure. This wasn't a rogue idiot with a printer. This was organized, calculated, and deliberate. And you're not the only target." She pulled out copies of complaint forms, 22 of them. Filed across 3 separate agencies, environmental, zoning, commercial licensing. 12 had names that didn't match any registered residents. A few were just lazy. First names like Patriot 234 or Concerned Neighbor 77. Half the addresses traced back to the HOA's office Wi-Fi. "I'm bringing this to the district prosecutor," Sarah said, "but we need more. They need a narrative they can't ignore." I gave her one. I pulled up my security logs and internal reports, showed her footage of trucks delayed, interviews with drivers being pulled over for random inspections within half a mile of the property, always the same 2 officers. One of them, turns out, was married to HOA board member Tracy Swinton. "Jesus," Sarah muttered. They turned their board into a mob family. She brought in 2 junior attorneys and a data analyst, and within 48 hours, we had a working timeline, complete with maps, cell tower pings, and login records from the HOA network. One particularly damning email showed Karen forwarding an HOA board meeting agenda with the subject line, "Action Items, Project Chokehold." My name was on the list. Next to it, disrupt logistics, destabilize deliveries, create health versus environment narrative. That health narrative didn't take long to arrive. It was a Friday afternoon when the container showed up, dumped near the northeast corner of my fields, just inside the camera's blind spot. At first, it looked like a standard fertilizer drum, except this one had bright red stickers, restricted substance, EPA banned, 2010, A skull and crossbones stencil on the side. Cartoonish, like someone watched a documentary once and went full amateur hour. The problem? Even a fake hazard like that, sitting visible in a field, could spark a legal wildfire. I had Mateo suit up and collect it carefully. We wore respirators for show, not because I believed it was real. Inside? Some kind of fine white powder that turned out to be limestone dust and cornstarch. But the container? It was traced to an eBay account under the name Kathy Wills, which, according to Sarah's investigator, was registered to a Gmail that had once belonged to Karen's old campaign treasurer. Before I could even report it, the cavalry arrived. A news van parked across the road. 2 journalists stepped out, followed by a drone that lifted off and hovered right over my greenhouse. They didn't knock, didn't call, just stood there filming the gate and the container, which someone had clearly tipped them off about. Then Karen herself showed up, in a pastel blazer, big sunglasses, walking like she'd won something. "We're here to ask some questions," she told the camera, gesturing at my property like it was a crime scene. There are growing concerns in our community about soil contamination, dangerous compounds, unregulated farming activities. I stepped outside, holding a printed EPA certification of every registered substance I used, laminated and clean. "You're trespassing," I said calmly. "This is private property, and that container didn't come from here." She smirked. "Then you won't mind us asking a few questions on behalf of public safety." "I've got questions too," I said. "Like why the serial number on that container matches a shipment you signed for last month. It's in the logs. Want to see?" The smirk twitched. Barely. But I saw it. The cameraman kept rolling. I kept talking. "This isn't a farm. It's a licensed commercial grow site. These are FDA-compliant herbs grown under full regulatory supervision. My contracts are clean. My soil is tested quarterly. And I've got enough surveillance footage to make your HOA meetings look like the Nixon tapes." She left, not in a rush, but her silence was louder than anything she could have said. The next morning, I woke up to a headline in the Baton Rouge Chronicle. "HOA president under investigation after planted hazmat barrel found on farm." Someone had leaked the eBay logs. Sarah swore it wasn't her. I didn't press. Let the vultures turn on themselves. At this point, it was no longer just harassment. It was criminal fabrication, obstruction of commerce, environmental fraud. We had evidence of tampering, digital impersonation, collusion with law enforcement, and now manufactured contamination. Sarah filed a civil suit that same day. The claim was detailed. 92 pages of violations, timelines, affidavits, and exhibits. We demanded damages for the broken contracts, defamation, operational interference, legal fees, and mental distress. The number at the bottom was 7 figures long. We hit send. And just like that, the war changed fronts. Now they weren't just playing offense. They were in retreat. If you've never seen a wounded predator, let me tell you, it's not the blood that makes it dangerous. It's the silence, the way it stops moving, stops breathing almost, and just watches. That's what Karen did after the lawsuit dropped. No calls, no sudden police visits, no HOA newsletters about community safety. Just a vacuum. And when the air goes that still, you can bet something's winding up in the dark. The first clue came when my supplier out of Shreveport missed a delivery window by 24 hours. That wasn't like them. I called the dispatcher, got rerouted 3 times, finally reached someone who stammered through an apology about logistical confusion and reputational concerns. I asked what that meant. He said, off the record, someone had called their compliance officer claiming I was under federal investigation for environmental malpractice, and that doing business with me could complicate their licensing. Another supplier dropped us the same week. Sarah started digging and found the common thread. Both companies received anonymous emails from an account called Clean Soil Watchdog, all following the same template. Links to that news footage, quotes from HOA complaints, even edited screenshots that made my greenhouse look like a toxic dump. Someone was trying to strangle me with the same rope they'd tried to hang me with before, just in a fancier knot. Then came the offer. It arrived via courier. A man in a crisp suit handed me a sealed envelope, said he was just a messenger, and walked off before I could get his name. Inside was a formal letter from a company called Cypress Ridge Acquisitions. They were interested in purchasing my property at fair market value plus a 10% incentive due to recent regional zoning fluctuations. It read like a standard corporate land buyout, but a little too standard. I passed the letter to Sarah. Her eyes narrowed on the contact info. "This number routes through a shell firm in Baton Rouge," she said. "Guess who sits on their board?" I didn't need to guess. Karen Wendler wasn't just trying to push me out. She was trying to buy me out, but without the stink of her name on the paperwork. Because if I took the bait and sold under pressure, it'd look voluntary. No lawsuit, no public loss, just a graceful exit. But I wasn't going anywhere, so I laid bait of my own. We created a false front, a mock listing for my property through a dummy LLC registered in Oregon. Sarah made sure it looked legit. A quiet landowner looking to exit agriculture and retire abroad. The site was clean, the contact email professional. We posted it on 3 industry forums known to attract land developers. Within 72 hours, Cypress Ridge bit. They sent a proposal. Same number, same lawyer. But this time, they included a contract. That's when Sarah pulled her magic. We embedded a clause deep in the agreement, a boilerplate-seeming paragraph that, upon acceptance, would acknowledge the buyer's awareness of and participation in previous attempts to suppress agricultural operations, specifically referencing the language used in the fake EPA complaints and forged search warrant. Legally, it was a tripwire. And they stepped right on it. Signed, returned, time-stamped. We had them. Sarah forwarded the contract to the district prosecutor's office with a cover letter that read like a murder confession. Within 24 hours, they opened a new investigation, not just into the HOA, but into Cypress Ridge and its financial connections. Turns out, 2 of the investors were current HOA board members. Another was Karen's campaign advisor. And speaking of campaigns, Karen's website went dark that same day. Her social media accounts disappeared, but not fast enough. Screenshots of her platform, protecting the community from industrial pollution and unsafe commerce, circulated like wildfire, next to headlines about fake warrants and planted toxic barrels. The timing couldn't have been worse for her. It was a perfect storm. The civil suit, the criminal probe, the exposure of the buyout scheme, and now campaign fraud. Sarah called it economic entrapment. The DA called it civil sabotage. I just called it Tuesday. And while Karen hid behind silence and subpoenas, I planted new rows of turmeric, a fresh bed of echinacea. Life kept moving, like roots under dry soil, quiet, slow, inevitable. Because what they never understood is that the deeper you bury a man like me, the more anchored he gets. The courthouse smelled like polish, paper, and old air conditioning. Not a glamorous place, but it had one hell of a view. The kind of view you only get from standing on the high ground and knowing damn well you earned it. Karen Wendler showed up to the hearing looking like a politician who forgot which camera to smile at. Pale pink blazer, pearl earrings, hair pulled so tight it probably pinched. But her eyes? They didn't blink much. Not anymore. She sat flanked by her lawyer and two board members, both of whom looked like they'd just realized they'd bet the farm on a collapsing deck of cards. One was Tracy Swinton, her mouth drawn into a thin, furious line. The other, Richard Boyd, was already sweating through his shirt before the judge even entered. Sarah and I had the front table. We didn't say much. Didn't need to. Our case was stacked higher than a Baptist potluck. Digital evidence, sworn affidavits, subpoenaed emails, surveillance logs, verified timestamps, bank transfers, you name it. 92 exhibits, 7 direct violations of Louisiana Commerce Codes, 3 counts of intentional disruption of lawful agricultural operations, and a civil damages claim of $1 million. Karen's team tried to stall, said it was coincidental, unintentional, misunderstood. They claimed the HOA had merely been overzealous in protecting community interests. The judge, a gray-haired woman with the patience of a landmine, wasn't having it. "I've reviewed the documents," she said, eyes flicking between the pages, including the forged warrant, the fake contamination report, the purchase trail for the EPA barrel, and this curious real estate offer containing a confession clause. She tapped the contract with one long finger. "I don't believe in coincidences," she added flatly. Their lawyer shifted like a man sitting on hot gravel. He tried to redirect, suggested maybe I had provoked the situation, citing my military background and confrontational demeanor. Sarah leaned in, calm as a sniper at dawn. "Your Honor," she said, "my client served this country with distinction. He now runs a legal, licensed agricultural enterprise that provides product to both hospitals and research firms. The only thing he's guilty of is not bowing to a suburban junta drunk on authority and HOA bylaws." The courtroom chuckled. Even the bailiff cracked a smile. And then came the moment. We played the video, a recorded HOA Zoom call, obtained through discovery, where Karen said, clear as crystal, "If we can block his trucks long enough, his contracts'll dry up. He'll either fold or sell. Simple pressure." Silence. Even Karen didn't blink. The judge exhaled through her nose, slow and deliberate. Verdict: the HOA was found guilty of organized interference with commercial operations. The HOA was ordered to pay $1 million in damages to me and my business. Karen Wendler and Richard Boyd were charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of legal documents, and commercial sabotage. Tracy Swinton faced charges for knowingly facilitating false law enforcement complaints. And the cherry on top? The HOA itself was dissolved by court order. Ceased. Terminated. Gone. The bylaws invalidated. Assets frozen pending investigation. But it didn't stop there. Karen's campaign was suspended. She was removed from the ballot. Her remaining donors withdrew. Her husband, still in custody, now facing additional charges for computer crimes and impersonating a federal officer. Oh, and her home? Seized as collateral against the court's judgment. At auction 3 weeks later, it was purchased by Mateo, my logistics manager, with a pool of staff contributions. He said he was going to turn it into a botanical school for inner-city kids. "Call it poetic irrigation," he told me. I couldn't argue with that. And as for me, I didn't feel victorious. I felt vindicated, like something heavy I'd been carrying for months had finally been set down in the dirt. We shook hands outside the courthouse. No press conference, no smug speeches, just a quiet walk back to my truck. Dusty boots, clean slate, and more land to plant. Some mornings I wake up before the sun even thinks about rising. The sky's still purple, and the only sound is the low hum of the grow lights warming up in the east greenhouse. That's peace. Not silence. Peace. The kind you have to fight for. Things have changed on the land. Not much at first glance. Same rows of herbs, same gravel crunch under my boots. But there's a different weight to it now. The kind that comes when you take something back. Not just your name or your income, but your dignity. The crew's bigger now. We hired 3 new people. 2 of them were working in delivery jobs before they came here. Said they wanted to work somewhere with a boss who doesn't fold. I told them, I don't fold, I transplant. Sarah says we're now a case study. Literally. A professor at LSU asked permission to use our story in a course on agricultural law and property rights. I sent him a crate of lavender and told him to teach it loud. Karen's name still gets mentioned sometimes, mostly in whispers at local meetings, in that awkward way people talk about a bad storm after the cleanup is done. She's not in prison yet, but she's well on her way. Out on bail, under investigation for campaign fraud and abuse of power. Her husband's already taken a deal, 8 years, no parole. Guess the HOA didn't have a bylaw for that. As for her old house, Mateo really did turn it into a teaching center. Called it Root School. Has a sign out front that says, "Growth doesn't ask permission." I like that. And me? I've started writing. Just a column in a regional agri-law magazine. Title's a little dramatic. Defending the Dirt. But it's catching on. Got calls from 3 farmers in other counties asking for advice on fighting back against HOA overreach. Funny how quickly you go from being the guy they tried to bury to the one folks turn to when they need a shovel of their own. One morning I stood by the new front gate. Stronger now, with cameras, reinforced steel, and a little plaque that says, "Private property. Trespassers will be educated." I sipped my coffee and looked out at the field. Chamomile was in bloom. The air smelled like healing. They thought they could poison my land. Instead, they just made it grow deeper roots.